Now, Chapter 1, we're going to look at the alphabet and the vowels. If you'll look at Chapter 1, Section 1, you'll see on the first page there we have 6 columns. In the far left column we have the printed letters as they will appear in the Hebrew Bible. And in the next column we have the letters with the final forms. And then we have the names of the letters, the phonetic values, the transliteration, and then the cursive. Now, I will start by writing out the printed letters, but also I'm going to do the cursive because it's just been ingrained in me, and therefore I'm going to also do some cursive writing with you also. So let's look at the letters. I'm going to be writing from right to left because that's the way Hebrew is written. And so the first letter is an aleph. The aleph looks sort of like that when it is printed. And the cursive, as you will see in the far right column, looks like this. That's the cursive. Now the aleph is really a silent letter. It is not pronounced. It is still pronounced in Arabic. It's a little glottal stop sound is something you would hear in like cooperate, that little operate part of it. But in modern Hebrew, it's not pronounced. You'll just basically pronounce the vowel, which is either under it or beside it. So the first letter is aleph. The next one is called beit. In the printed, it looks something like this. And if you notice, it can have a dot in it, or it can be without a dot. I will just, you've got to know which letters can have a dot and which letters do not have a dot. But we'll talk about the significance of that later. And in the cursive, it looks like something like this. And again, the cursive could either have a dot or not a dot. Now the beit can be pronounced one of two ways. If it has a dot in it, as you see here, it would be a B as in boy. But if it's without the dot, then it's a V as in victory. And so that is the beit. The next letter is called gimel. It's the G sound. And again, it can have a dot, it may not have a dot. And my cursive's a little bit different than the cursive that's printed. My cursive gimel looks like this. And again, with a dot or without a dot, we're going to still pronounce that as a G either way. So we're really not going to distinguish the pronunciation whether the gimel has the dot or without the dot. We're not going to make any distinction. Whereas again with the beit, we will make a distinction in pronunciation. And the next letter, the fourth letter down, is the daled. The daled looks like that. And the cursive daled has a form more like this. And again, this is another letter that can be with or without a dot. And again, like the gimel, it's really not going to matter whether it has the dot or not. We're going to make this a D sound, D as in dog. Okay. For the next letter is called the hey. It's the H. And it looks something like this in a printed text. But the way it's going to look in the cursive is it's going to have curves. And so again, this is going to be the H sound. This is called hey. The next letter is the vav. The vav is simply going to be a straight line. And in the printed text, of course, it's going to have a little top on it like this. But the way I write it, it's just going to simply be a straight line. And so this is called a vav. It's pronounced V in modern Hebrew. In ancient Hebrew, it was a W, and it's still a wow in Arabic. But today, in modern Hebrew pronunciation, this is a V sound. We'll call it a vav. The next letter is a zayin. My printed zayin looks like that. And my cursive zayin looks more like this. The zayin is the Z. Z is in zoo. And so there is the zayin. The next letter is called chet. It's really a sort of a rough breathing of an H, a ch, and it looks like that in the printed. And when we write it in cursive, it's almost like writing an N in English. And so this is the chet. Now you want to be careful to distinguish between the hey and the chet. And the difference, of course, is the fact that the hey is not connected in its left vertical, but you can see it's fully connected in the chet. And again, the pronunciation of this will be a ch, so it's sort of a spitting H. The next letter is called tet. Tet is T. Hebrew has a lot of T sounds in it. And the way the printed tet looks is something like this, kind of a horseshoe look. But I will never write my tet like this. I will write it the cursive way, which would be more like something like this. Again, I'll come down and around like this. This is a tet. It is a T sound. The next letter is the yod. And for the yod, I'm going to draw lines like on a paper. And so let's say we have a letter like Aleph. And so Aleph would look like this. But the yod, which is the Y, the yod is going to be a letter that's written high between the lines, as you see here. Now the printed yod it looks more like this. It has more curves to it. But again, my yod is simply going to be a straight line, but high. The vav, which we've already had, of course, is going to look like this. So the vav is going to be longer. The yod is going to be short and up high between the lines. The next letter is the kaf. The kaf looks like a reverse C. And kaf comes in two varieties. It can be without the dot, in which case you pronounce it just like the chet. So it's a ch. But if it has the dot, then you'll pronounce it like an English K, special K. And so therefore, we're going to have that dot in it. So kangaroo, if you like. So with the dot, it is, again, an English K. This form has what we call a final form. And if you've taken any Greek, if you can remember the sigma at the beginning of a word or in the middle of the word is written one way. You remember in Greek, your sigma is written this way if it's initial or medial. But if it's final, then it looks more like our S in English. So this is the way you would write a sigma if it's a final form, and this is the way you'd write a sigma in Greek if it's a initial or medial. Well, it's the same way in Hebrew with the kaf. The kaf has a initial medial form that looks like the reverse C. And when you make a final form, if it's the last letter in a word, a final form, what you do normally in Hebrew is you straighten out the bottom. And so if we straighten that out, and of course we're going to get rid of the curve too, it's going to look more like this. And you put two dots in it. I'll explain the significance of the two dots later. But for now, just keep this in mind that you sort of straighten out the edge as I have it here. Now, if we draw the lines, let me redraw this. If we draw the lines of the paper, so here is your normal kaf, and then here's the final kaf. Notice how this line, this vertical here, goes beyond the line here at the bottom. So keep that in mind also. And again, even the final kaf, if it's going to have the dot like this, you would get rid of these two dots and simply have one dot. And if you have that again, it would be a K sound. Okay, so again, with final letters, normally what they like to do is straighten out the bottom and bring it below the line. And so again, this is a final kaf, and remember those two dots there. Okay. The next letter. The next letter is the L, and it is the lamed, and the way it's written looks something like this. Now the cursive, it looks like this. This is my cursive lamed. And again, if we were to draw lines on the page, notice that this letter goes above the top line. And so again, it's like this, or here again is the what looks like the printed. Now again, my handwriting looks different than the printed letters, and this often throws students, but you've got to remember, look at an English book that has print in there, and then compare it to the way you handwrite, and you'll see there's quite a difference, and it's the same with Hebrew. And I know this is an early difficulty for students, having to learn not only the printed letters that you're going to use in the grammar, that you're going to use in a Hebrew Bible, but at the same time, you've got to learn the handwriting of your professor or your teacher. And so here's my handwriting, and you'll get to learn other people's handwriting as time goes on with Hebrew. Okay, the next letter is the mem. Well, going back to the lamed, of course, that's the L sound, as in Larry. Now we have the mem. It's an M, as in Mickey Mantle. And the printed M looks like this. The cursive looks like this. Looks like an N, but you write it backwards in English. But this is the mem. The mem has a final form, but this is the only final form that does not lengthen out and come below the line. And so it looks like a square in the printed text with just a little bit hanging over the edge here. I'll write it again for you. It looks like this. It's like a square with just a little edge there hanging over. The way you do it in the cursive, it's sort of like a circle with a line at the bottom like this. And so there is your cursive mem, which is a final form. And again, that is an M. The next is the noon. The noon. The noon, of course, is an N sound, as in Nancy. And so the printed noon looks like this. I probably overemphasized that. Let's try it again. Something like this. And this is the noon, which is an N. And it is written between the lines. But the cursive N is often written below the line like this. This is a cursive N. Now, as you can see, the noon has a final form. And what you'll do is you'll just straighten out this bottom. You'll straighten out those bottoms and just simply draw a straight line that, again, will go below the writing line like this. So you've got to watch out for these letters here. This would be my yod. This will be my vav. And this is a final noon that comes below the line. So again, they're all straight lines. And it's just a matter of how they're written in relation to other characters. Again, I'll write an olive here to give you a point of comparison. Okay, so that's the noon. The next letter is a samic. And if you were to try to draw one, the way the printed letter looks, it's sort of like a circle with just, again, a little overhang here. But basically, I'm going to draw a samic like just a circle like this. So that's going to be my samic. A samic's going to be simply a circle. The next letter is ayin. Of course, the samic is an S, and the Hebrew has a lot of S sounds. So the samic is an S sound. The next one is an ayin. It's another silent letter, just like aleph is a silent letter. Ayin is also a silent letter. Again, they pronounce it in Arabic today. And the way one person describes the pronunciation of an ayin is incipient vomiting. And indeed, it does sort of sound that way to us. It's an ayin. It's real deep down in the throat as you pronounce it. And the printed text of the ayin looks like this. Again, I'll show you. And the cursive looks more like this. So that's the cursive ayin. And again, it's a silent letter. When you see it, what you'll do is you'll pronounce the vowel under it or beside it. The next letter is called pei. And the pei in the printed letter looks sort of like this. And when you come to the cursive, the pei looks more like this. Okay, the pei can have a dot or it can be without a dot, and it makes a difference in the way we're going to pronounce it. If it's without a dot, as you see here, we're going to pronounce it as an F, as in Frank. If we have a dot in it, then it's going to be a P, as in pie. And so it's going to be a P with a dot, and then if it's without the dot, again, it's going to be an F sound. And again, this form also has a final form. And with the final form, let me draw you again the writing lines. And so it would look like this with a printed final pei. Notice it still has the little hook here that you see in the usual round form. But again, what we're doing is we're straightening it out. And the final cursive form goes the other direction. The final cursive form actually looks like a beta, if you've had some Greek again, or a B. But again, it'll come slightly above the line for the final pei in cursive. Okay, the next letter is yet another S sound for Hebrew, and it's known as the sadi. And the printed one, I sort of write like this. And the cursive, I write like that. And we have to be careful, the cursive Sadi, that it doesn't look too much like the Daled, the D, the fourth letter, cursive, so those can look alike. So you want to watch for that. The final form of Sadi, again we need to draw some lines. The final form for Sadi will again come down below the line. As you see here, again, they sort of straighten it out, and this is the way it looks. And in a final form of the cursive, it looks more like this. And again, I come over the top line here. And again, it comes down and around, as you see here. And again, Sadi is another type of S sound. Of course, originally, all these different S sounds would have been distinguished. But today, in modern Hebrew pronunciation, we really do not distinguish between the sounds. The next sound is a kof. It is the Q sound, and it again will come below the line, and it'll sort of look like an English P with the vertical coming down below the line. And again, that's a K or a Q sound, a kof. The next one is a resh. The resh is an R sound, and the way it looks in a printed text is like this. It has that curved ending, so you want to distinguish it from the Daled. The Daled has the straight corner. The resh has a rounded corner, and that's the distinction between the two letters. And again, this would be the R sound here. This is R, where this is the D sound. And so we've got to be careful as we write these that we make a distinction. In the cursive, it'll just simply be a mark like this. And so in cursive, you can clearly see the difference between the resh and the Daled. Here's the resh, and here's the Daled. So there's a clear distinction in the cursive. But in the printed text, it can be difficult. And as you're reading Hebrew for the first time, you'll really have to look for that straight corner or that rounded corner. Okay, the next two letters are made the same way, with the only difference being a dot. Little diacritical dot, and the first one is over here, and this would be what's called a scene, and yet it's another S sound. It's a scene, and if you put the dot on the right, then it's an SH sound, a sh sound, as in sheen or something like this. And so the dot over here is an SH, but if the dot's on the other side, it's just a simple S sound. And the cursive will again it'll look like this, with the dot either over here or the dot over here. And with it over here, it's just a regular S sound. And if it's over here on the right, then it's again an SH sound. So that's seen, and then with a dot on the right side, that's a sheen. Okay, and then finally, the last consonant that we need to look at is the tav. The tav looks something like this in the printed text, and then the tav that's written in cursive looks like this. And so that's the tav. And again, if you'll notice, it can have a dot or it can be without a dot, but that's not going to matter in our way of pronouncing it. Either way, it's going to be another T sound. And so with or without a dot, we're going to pronounce it as a T. So those are the consonants of Biblical Hebrew. Now, if you look at Chapter 1, Section 2, we talk there about the printed letters. We talk about that there's 6 letters that can have the dot or can be without the dot. But really, only 3 of those letters make a difference in pronunciation. And again, I have that there. Only the bait, the kaf, and the pei. Only those 3 make a distinction. Whether you have the dot or not, they change the pronunciation. In Section 3, you can see I discussed the final letters again and show you examples, so you have many examples there. In Section 4, we have the phonetic values, where again we go through and discuss the ones that have unique sounds or no sound at all. And so, again, you want to look over that situation there. In Section 5, we have the guttural letters, and those letters are very important that you memorize them as guttural letters. Just like back up in Section 2, the 6 letters that take a dot. It's very important that you know those 6 and those 3 that distinguish pronunciation. When you come down to section 5, the guttural letters, there it's very important that you know the 4, sometimes 5 gutturals. And you can see it's aleph, hey, chet, ayin, and then sometimes resh. Those are your guttural letters, and they'll be very important in knowing those letters. They have certain unique features about them that you're going to learn in a few chapters, and they're going to be something that you're going to have to keep an eye on in all of Hebrew, both first semester and second semester, first and second part of this book. The guttural letters play a very important role, so you have to know that. Now if you go to section 6 of chapter 1, we talk about the vowels. And of course the vowels, we also call them vowel points, because what they are, they're a series of like dashes and dots, and again the dashes can also look like this, and a series of dots and dashes, and so they're called vowel points because of this. Now the vowel points, if you look at the chart on chapter 1, section 6, you notice there's a chart there, and it's very important that you distinguish between short and long vowels in Hebrew. That's very important that you make that distinction. Now oftentimes there's no distinction in pronunciation between a long vowel and a short vowel in Hebrew. The only example is the segol. The segol versus, let's say, the seire and the hirik. There is a distinction in pronunciation there, but even in rapid speech, even in those situations, sometimes they can sound very similar. But you need to know, as a matter of observation, the difference between short vowels and long vowels. That distinction is essential in Hebrew. And again, it's not so much in pronunciation as it is in observation and how the language is going to work here in the phonology of the language. So let's look at them now. As you look at that chart, you can see in the far right column, I talk about the phonetic value. And I'll say A as in father, the E as in they, A, you see, and so forth. That's the way we'll pronounce them. And then I give you the name of the vowel, the patach, the segol, the hirik, kametz chatuv, kibbutz. You can see that in the short. And over in the long, you get kamet, seire, and so forth. Then next, I give you the vowel, just show you the dot or the dash. And then I give you a letter, and I always give you samik, and then the vowel written either under it or to the left of it, or under and to the left of it. And then in the right column, I give you the transliteration. And so let's look at these. We'll first do the short vowels. The first one's called patach. And again, I'm going to write the samik. Here's the samik. And the patach is simply a dash that's written under the letter. And again, this would be a as in father. And so you have an S and then an A, so this is a sa. And that is your patach. It's a short A. The next letter is a short E, and it is a segol, like this. But this is not the E as in they, this is the E as in pet. And so this is like se. And there you can see the segol, 3 dots arranged in an inverse triangle, as you can see there. Okay. The next one is a hirik. A hirik is simply an I sound. It's 1 dot written under the letter. And I say it's an I as in the E and B. And so again, it's just simply an I under the samik. The next vowel is a kametz chatuf. It is a T looking symbol. And it is an O as in note. And so this is a kametz chatuf. This would be like so, something like that. And then finally, we have a kibbutz, which are 3 dots, sort of like staircase dots. And this is a U as in flute. And so su would be the idea here. Okay, now let's go to the other column. Let's go to the long. And again, I'll put a samik. And the first one is what's called a kametz. It's a long A. And of course you can tell that that symbol is the exact same symbol as the kametz chatuf that we had under the short. And so when you see this symbol here, this T under a letter, for right now you want to consider them all to be long A's, kametzes, not kametz chatuf. But later on we'll show you how to distinguish whether this symbol is a short O or a long A. But for now, for practical purposes, consider them all long A's. And again, later on, we'll make a distinction. And again, even though it's a long A, we're going to pronounce it just like a patach. And therefore, this is sa. So no difference in pronunciation, but you need to recognize this is a long A, whereas that patach that we had is a short A. You must know that distinction. Okay, the next vowel, long vowel, is the sere. The sere is 2 dots written horizontally under a letter. And again, this is the E as in they. So this is say, as you can see here. But you can also have something called sere yod. And you have the sere, and then to the left of the letter you have a yod. And so this is the vowel. It's all together. This is called sere yod. It's pronounced just like a sere. And notice I have a little omega mark to the right of it to symbolize that this is what's called a historic long vowel. A historic long vowel means it can never be shortened to a short vowel or to something like a vocal schwa, something like that. Historic long vowels, you're going to learn to love those. They don't change much. They can change a little bit in the way they're written, but they're not going to shorten in any way. In Hebrew, you can shorten long vowels sometimes to long vowels to short vowels, and then short vowels can be reduced to vocal schwas. But historic long vowels, they're not going to shorten, and so you need to know the historic long vowels, and this is the first one. And you can tell historic long vowels because they're written with a yod or with a vav, and we'll see those as we continue to work. So this first historic long vowel is again a sere yod, and it's pronounced just like a sere. No distinction from just a regular sere. Notice the transliteration. You have an E with a little hat on it, like that. And so just notice the difference in the transliterations on these. The next one is the segol yod. And so you have a letter, you have the segol, and then you have the yod. And because it has the yod, it again is a historic long vowel. And there you can see it. And again, you can see how we transliterate that. And again, basically, we're going to pronounce that. Sometimes it's going to sound like a sere, to be honest with you, and other times it's going to sound like a segol, according to how rapidly we pronounce it sometimes. But again, the sound is going to be similar to a segol, probably. Okay, the next one is the hirik yod. And with the hirik yod, you're simply going to have the hirik, and then you're going to have, of course, the yod written to the left of it. And again, this is a long I, but it's going to sound just like the I as in B. So again, this is like C, something like that. The next one is a long O, and this is called holem. And so you're going to have your letter, and then you're going to have this dot high and to the left of the letter. And again, this is a long O as in note, and so again, this is so. And this is a long O vowel. The next one's called holem vav. And again, here what you're going to have is you're going to have a vav with a holem on the top of it, like this. And again, we're going to pronounce it the same way. This is simply so. But it's historic long. And the reason it's historic long is it's got this letter, vav, written with it. As again, before, what we saw is it had a yod. So if it has a yod or a vav, that's how we know that it's historic long. And again, the significance of that is it's not going to reduce in any way. And later on in Hebrew, we're going to do a lot of reducing. And finally, the last one is the shurik. The shurik, again, is a vav, but this time we're going to put a dot in the middle like this. And it's going to be pronounced just like the kibbutz. So it's the U as in flute. And again, this is be su, is how you would pronounce this. And again, it's also, as you can see, historic long because it's written with a vav. Okay, so that is the vowels. And again, it's very important that you know those vowel points and that you learn them just like, again, you learn the consonants. The next symbol you need to know is the schwa. The schwa is 2 dots vertically under a letter. And a schwa is an indistinct vowel sign, like in English. And again, it has sort of a sound. Well, I call it indistinct because you can't tell whether it's an A, E, I, O, U. It's just a it just fits for any of them. And what it is, it's just a slurred vowel. It's a vowel that's been pronounced so rapidly that you really can't make out what it is. So it's been slurred. And so this is a schwa, and you need to know that symbol also. Next, in section 1.8, I have certain observation on the vowels. And the first one, of course, is the short vowels. And I talk about short vowels may reduce to a schwa. But also I mention the fact that short vowels may lengthen to their long counterparts, and I give you that. The patach may lengthen to kametz, hirik can lengthen to sere. Hirik normally does not lengthen to hirik yod here. It lengthens to sere. And then kametz chatuf frequently lengthens to holam, and so you want to keep those things in mind. But again, when these types of lengthenings occurs or reduction to vocal schwas occur, we're going to discuss that later. But just know that short vowels can reduce to a schwa, and then short vowels can lengthen, and know which short vowels lengthen to what long vowels. Make sure you do know that. And then next we have observations on the long vowels. And again, I discuss historic long vowels are written with yod or vav. And these never reduce to a short vowel or to a vocal schwa. But here comes the problem in number 2. Historic vowels may be written defectively. And when we talk about defective writing, we're talking about writing it partially instead of fully. So for instance, in the example I gave you with the holam vav, this would be fully written. But you can partially write this, or you can defectively write it. And when you do that, you don't have the vav, you simply have the holam, and so that looks just like a regular holam. And sometimes it can be difficult to know whether this is historic long or not. But by the time we get to those problems, you're not going to have much problem. So I know right now it looks like that's going to be a major problem to you. It's really not. I think as we move on in the chapters, when these things are written defectively, should not cause you too much trouble. On occasion it will, but again, I wouldn't worry too much about it. Just remember that what you can do with all of these historic long vowels that have the yod or the vav, you can drop the yod and vav, and yet it still be historic long. So again, you can have something like a sere, and in fact, it could be historic long with the yod simply not written. So again, at first that sounds like it's going to be a major problem. Really, it's not too bad. One in particular, though, I do need to mention, and this one can cause you trouble down the road, and that's the shurik. Again, the shurik is written like this, but if it's written defectively, the way the shurik is written defectively is with a kibbutz. That one in particular you need to keep in mind, because that one will cause you trouble down the road. And